Is that unmuted? Unmute that for me. Good. That's good. So I can pull up the first presentation. Cluster. No, yeah. Cluster. Yeah, I wish there was something I could say other than call you. I guess he went back to work for us. I'm not sure what's going on exactly. So we good? We had you right away.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Yep, there we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming back from lunch and walk. And this is usually sleepy time. We aren't going to have sleepy time this afternoon. This is going to be wide awake, having fun. I'm feeling good because we just got back from our walk and we're going to jump right in. I'm Ellen Walston with the Eastern Carolina Injury Prevention Program at ECU Health Medical Center. And we are thrilled to have finally seen this day come to fruition after a year of planning and with a great planning team with BikeWalk NC, just everyone that has been a part of this. So we're super excited just to welcome you. And again, thank y'all so much for being here. And I have a fabulous panel. I have the best panel of the entire days, and I'm going to introduce them to you. And what happens when people just come up here and read bios? That's sleepy time. We're not going to have sleepy time. We're going to wake up, and I'm going to tell you something cool or ask a question or make this fun. So we're not going to read bios. You have them in your wonderful program that Heidi completed and made for us. And please go back and read them because I've been studying mine. And these are some pretty cool people. So I am going to start with Stephen, and we're going to go right down the line. And then they're going to have a designated amount of time to share some really powerful information with you. We will have time for Q&A, and I'd like to hold that to the end unless there's something just super burning when they're talking, if the panel's okay. Otherwise, I'd like to hold it to the end. So what I picked out from Stephen's bio that I really, really liked is he said, friends not met yet. That's a cool guy. Friends not met yet. And I know he's met some friends. I've met some friends these last few hours yesterday and look forward to tomorrow as well. So I really thought that was cool. And Stephen is amazing. He is my friend that I have to touch every time I see him because he is a miracle. And I'm so, so thankful that he's here to share with you today. So what stood out for me, friends not yet met. So think about that, guys. Our lives are short, and think about friends not yet met. Then I have my new friend, Miss Tasha, that I met a little while ago, and we had a nice time connecting. And what really, really struck me with her bio was her mission of eradicating all mobile device use in vehicles in order to help keep our families, fleets, and communities safe from this form of distracted driving. We just heard Joel a little while ago. He has a passionate story. He is amazing, the work that he has done across our country. I met him many years ago, and Casey was a beautiful, beautiful young lady. And I love Tasha's mission. And it goes to Vision Zero, guys. We think sometimes Vision Zero is not possible. Yet no one in this room wants to lose a loved one. Not a single one of us. Tasha's mission is very important and it is reachable, just like Vision Zero. So thank you, Tasha, for being here. Then we have Miss Ann that I just met a few moments ago, and she is an attorney, and I can't wait to hear what she has to share. And what really struck me about her bio is she is an off-road cyclist. I want to hear about that because I imagine that's pretty cool. And we actually have a place down 43 that some folks go to do off-road cycling. Just, it's a really cool place. It's kind of a best kept secret. So I'd love to hear more about that. And we will finish with the caboose of Dr. Poulin. And he is with us here at ECU. And I don't know where he was born or where he is from, but I do know that he went to Chicago Medical School. So I wonder what must be his favorite pizza place in Chicago. I know about Giordani's, and there's another one I went to when Lifesavers happened in Chicago this year. So maybe he'll tell us his favorite pizza. Everybody thinks about Chicago and pizza. So I just want to go ahead and open with our fabulous panel, and please give them your full attention, and thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephen, as you heard. A question for you first. Are you comfortable? Everyone comfortable? Relaxed, a good meal, delicious plantains and whatnot? All right, good. So one of my offices as a psychologist, I used to have a framed quote that I liked, that my job as a psychologist was to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. So if you're comfortable, get ready to be disturbed, okay? To know there's an emergency exit there, there, and there. This is too much for you? Feel free, we can talk later. Get a breather. All right. So the rest of you, buckle those seatbelts, you're in for a ride. So let me take you for a ride. So last November, I had the great time just to finish a Pilates class with my wonderful wife and some friends and was riding home. And I chose, this is my cycling camera in the front. I chose to ride down the road, but I knew that even with my helmet on, with a mirror, with lights and a jersey and whatnot, that I'm facing the setting sun. So the quieter road that I typically take, I knew drives right into the sun. Drivers are going to be blinded, they're not going to see me. So I purposely went south in order to go west. I got about 13, 14-mile ride home. Beautiful day like this, I'm riding home, enjoying it. And you'll see, car after car can see me, because I know because they give me the lane, they give passing, we're smiling and waving, tooting horns, and just, they're enjoying it, I'm enjoying it. It's a gorgeous fall afternoon, Sunday afternoon, just before Thanksgiving. University's gone, ECU's quiet, Greenville's quiet, low traffic, plodding along. So you see that up there's my Garmin, kind of in the right-hand top quarter. I'm just cruising, but I'm also looking at the sun saying, I need to get home. I got about another 15, 20 minutes of sunlight. So I'm pedaling, I'm probably going about 15, 16 miles an hour, cruising along. My Garmin's doing this, my Strava's running. So interesting enough, after this Garmin stopped, when I started up again about 6 months later, it actually still had the data from that. So I can show you that data if you want, but I'm just cruising along, loving it. Cotton's oh shit! That was the word you probably can't hear because there's no volume there. That's what I said, but I flew through the air, up, and I hit the ground in the middle of the road. Somehow, at some level, my reaction was, get out of the road, dummy. And so I shimmied off. So let me give you a different view. So this is my cycling camera. That's in the back of the bike. So I'm right on, it's a little shorter. See my back wheel? No, I'm holding my line, moving along. Damn! I'm on the left side of that white line because in this state with the contributory negligence, if I do 1% of something wrong, I can't collect any damage if something were to happen. And the right side of that line is full of debris, sharp metal, glass, things I would swear about to avoid. So I want to hold my line. Holding my line, I'm being predictable for every motorist behind me. You've heard enough of me moaning. So that afternoon, or that, I got taken to the hospital. A couple weeks later, I'm able to get the State Highway Patrol. And I also got to give a shout out to my lovely wife here, who supported me all through this and throughout life and Midwest. I wouldn't be here without her and my family's support. So I need to always tell you I love you. This is the police report from the State Highway Patrol. This is public information, so I didn't bother redacting the driver's information, my information, or the trooper's name. This is the backside. This is DMV Form 349. If you look at the diagram here, you'll see that's pretty fair representation of what happened. Car 1 hit the cyclist and wiped me out. It shows, however, that the shoulders of the road were 7 feet wide. I call bullshit. You go out there and measure it, and I did with a tape measure. They're 4 feet if you push the kudzu and the grass back, at best. Okay? The police officer, I understand, doesn't have to correct any of these reports, any errors in it, unless he or she chooses to do so. It stands at 7 feet on both sides, even though it's not. If you read the narrative carefully, you'll find that I was headed east, against the sun. But both vehicles, 1 and 2, were headed west. So if you read the narrative, I got a head-on collision because I was riding the wrong way on the street. If you look at the diagram, I'm doing the right thing. What do you think my insurance agency is going to read? The one that follows what they want. Well, this driver happened to be driving with a revoked license, no insurance, expired tags, and took me out. Come to find out, the officer that night, when he came to the emergency room, said, "Got some bad news. She has no insurance and no license and expired tags." I'm like, "So what happened?" He's like, "Well, we took the tags off the car and I left her there." I said, "So what prevented her from driving home?" "Well, she said she was going to get a ride." She lives about 70 miles from here or so. He came back, said like a half hour later in the car, and her were gone. I can't say for sure that she drove home that night with no tags, no license, and no insurance after hitting somebody, nearly killing them, but my belief is she did. Okay, so that was last November. So she got filed with driving with no license, no insurance, expired tags, and a failure to reduce speed. Not a word about hitting anyone. Meanwhile, I'm in intensive care, and I'm the risk about stroking out from my injuries and whatnot. I could die that night. Nothing in the police report about hitting somebody, plus the errors. Later on, the district attorney agreed to add careless and reckless driving. This was, when I submitted this to Trish and the comments about, this was actually updated last weekend. If you watch WITN, you'll find out that my case was actually heard this past Monday, and the driver was actually first agreed to plead guilty to failure to reduce speed. That was the original plea. I was able to actually get the careless and reckless driving back added. The first 3 charges were dropped because the police officer did not show up in court. So the DA felt they had to throw them out. There's some room for interventions here. So moving on from that, so errors in the police report we talked about. The shoulder width, direction of travel. It mentions that I used a helmet, which is good, but nothing about my lights. Daytime lights weren't not required, but extra safety, and I have 2. I'm known in the area sometimes on other bikes. I have a 4-foot metal flag that I nickname my paint sampler. You know, if when cars get too close, I usually get a paint sample what car they are. My clothing, my mirror, the preventive equipment. I'm the kind of guy, much to my wife's chagrin, if there's something safety that I can add to my bicycle or my ride, I do it. I pick my routes about the sun. I don't really care about the wind, because we always have wind here, okay? I'm trying to be as safe as possible whenever. Last year, up until this crash, I was closing on 10,000 miles. I tried to ride my bike, or I used to try to ride my bike more than I drove my car. All right, so I'm a pretty experienced cyclist. I've ridden with lots of you here. Says nothing about that stuff. So you can see my injuries from that night. I kind of crop this so you don't see my complete butt crack. What I can tell you is that injury right there, that's the bicycle seat. That hit and propelled me over the car. If you slow down that video, you can see actually my arm and head coming over the trunk. I got hit about 55, 60 miles an hour. By my understanding of physics, and I'm a psychologist, not a hard scientist, I have no earthly idea why I'm still alive. Why I'm not like Christopher Reeve. all I can imagine, whether it's divine intervention or just damn lucky, is I'm here for a purpose. So I always considered myself an advocate before. Oh, buddy, I'm now an advocate with a legal definition of having a disability. I now have the legal rights to advocate in a whole new way for myself and others. Stay tuned. So that was my right thigh area. They were worried it was a huge hematoma that swelled up about 3 times my size. That was probably going to kill me that first couple nights. If any blood clot got up to my brain, I'd be dead from that. And my shoulder was pretty much messed up. And I'm still almost a year out. I'm still going through physical therapy and having difficulty. The total bills haven't come in yet. Probably, I don't know, several $100,000. But of course, the cyclist knew him. I was like, first, are you okay? Second one, how's the bike? Total loss. Carbon fiber framed. I wrote a letter to the president of Trek saying, I think this bike will save my life. Because it absorbed a lot of impact and it shot me up over that car. What's touching was, this is the bike. My kids have always been lousy with birthday gifts. They can't, they're like, oh, we don't know what to get you, whatever. They completely surprised me for Father's Day that year. My son and daughter are, they're twins. They're up in Boston at school. My son's working in a bike shop. Even during the pandemic, he was able to get a nice road bike. All 3 of them, my wife and the kids, they all chipped in and said, this is your Father's Day, birthday, Christmas, every other anniversary, whatever present for the year. This Trek Damani, beautiful, smooth bike, had maybe 300-400 miles on it when it was destroyed. Complete loss. So there was a community support ride that Trish and other people and Tony and a good friend, Dave Manning, who's here. And I did get the name right, Dave, right? Dave Manning? Okay, in the back there. Led from the hospital, from the bike shop, Greenville Bicycle Company, to the hospital nearby. And because of COVID, I couldn't come out. And I told the hospital, like, listen, my friends are coming for a ride. If they can't come visit either, and probably the news is going to be here, you can either let me outside to see them, and at least wave for them to go by, or I'm going to wheel my wheelchair out to the street, and we'll have a film camera of that me in the street, and I'll say something. The hospital wouldn't let my friends ride their bikes by and wave at me. Well, they actually just set up a little ceremony. They rode by through the carport, waved, and it was all good. That touched my soul in so many ways. It helped me get through rehab in some really dark places. I've done multiple TV and print interviews over this stuff and trying to make this a bigger issue than just me, about safety for everybody and accessibility. So several days in a surgical trauma ward, almost a month in the hospital, rehab, ongoing PT surgery, limited mobility, ongoing issues. Over almost a year now, my life probably is forever changed by this and defined by what happened that one day when I was doing every single thing I knew to be right. Wheelchair accessibility, because I can't get around too easily, also means accessibility for people using strollers, scooters, shopping carts, walkers, etc. So I'm going around Greenville. I had to make sure, checked with a lawyer, that NC state law does consider wheelchair users as pedestrians if your wheelchair is under 1,000 pounds. Okay? So what do we know about state law? If you're a pedestrian, okay, and there are no sidewalks, notice plural, you are to use the roadway to the farthest side possible against the flow of traffic. So therefore, when the sidewalks don't have ramps, aren't accessible, or they're not existing, or sometimes once in a while, filled, plowed over snow or blocked by debris, I'm in the roadway. If I choose, if there's no ramp to that bus stop, which is just a pole in the ground, off the road, I'm in the roadway. The roadway means the travel lane, which means drivers get upset because they have to swerve around or it pauses them for a minute. They call the police, they're upset. So the police come out and they mean to keep me safe. I get that. And they've been nice. And I've been stopped, I think, about 6 times so far. But one time I got stopped in Farmville where my family lives. I was going out to the food line. I mentioned it to my wife. I remember this, but she didn't realize what it was because it's kind of a busy road. Farmville police stopped me. They said, I said, well, fine, give me the ticket and we'll fight this in court. Like, actually, you're out of town limits. We can't give it to you. I said, well, in a half hour after I shop, I'll be back in town until I'm coming back. Meet me there and give me a ticket then. He didn't show up. But man, he didn't have to because I got more than a ticket at home. So I have to promise I can't do that anymore in Farmville. Greenville, however, I did not promise for. So when I go to use the bus to go to PT or whatnot, I'm in the roadway. Or one time I was going to an NCDOT dedication for the highway that got renamed that you're coming in on 587. Well, it was on a grassy field that's down the road. There's no sidewalks there. And so after going to this with senators and DOT people and the mayors and council members, I was wheeling back down by the hospital here, in the road, stopped twice by the police, threatened to get with no ticket. I said, fine, give me the ticket. They called the office or whatever, and they said, okay, we won't, just go your way. Okay, so we saw that to work out. And I'm gonna work with Sergeant Ross about figuring either I'm wrong or we'll educate the police a little bit about wheelchair users and accessibility. So we know that in the Department of Justice under the Americans with Disabilities Act, if you repave or alter a roadway for existing sidewalks, you have to make sure there's curb ramps. Clear? That's only a 32-year-old civil rights law by the federal government. Does that mean you have to fix all the ones existing? But if you're living in a town or county that has more than 50 employees, whether it's part-time, full-time, seasonal, whatever, 50 total, yeah, they have to do an inventory or had to do an inventory back in the 90s and a transition plan. So by now, if you, all that phase in, we should have no problem, whatever, with any sidewalk, bus stop, or anything accessibility. If you go to the real or not real board out there, you might see some of those issues, perhaps. So when I look at North Carolina NCDOT's own internal report, and this is available on the web, you'll see here that, wow, when we did this, we find that there's 2,320 missing ramps identified. Those are the ones that they couldn't find. Not the ones that they haven't even done, but they couldn't find them, okay? The other 6,570 missing ramps, they're gonna complete that for a safety project in 2020. Okay, what we look at here are the 87,000 curb ramps here, 62%, nearly 54,000 curb ramps were found to be non-compliant. If we, like pull out calculators, that's fine. If we only do, 6,500 in 5 years, like 1,000 a year, the 54,000 plus the 6,500 that are missing, we're looking at a replacement plan of 60 years to be in compliance with a law that's 32 years old. So imagine if we told Black people, brown people back in the 60s, you'll get your voting rights someday, but it's gonna be like 92 years in the future before we're compliant. Would we accept that? Well, we're accepting this. NCDOT's own data. Check out your own town's data. You find out like in local towns, they don't even have their plans done yet. They don't have ADA coordinators. So there's issues. How do you use that sidewalk if it exists? If you look at the Ninth Circuit Court, sidewalks are actually considered a service. So access to that is denial of service. We have some other interesting issues like bus stops you can't get to. So yeah, I've been ticketed for that and it was tossed out in court because the court then said, well, we reviewed the video evidence and we don't find any fault. I called bullshit on that. I actually challenged about their dismissal of it. They wanted to go to trial. And so I had to actually get that because there was no video evidence. There was no cameras on that street there. I had my own video evidence that I hadn't seen yet, because they accused me of, I was ticketed for lying, sitting, or standing in the road, impeding traffic. And I was doing none of that. I said I was moving. Here's my Strava data. Here's my videos. I can show you that I was moving. I never stopped at any time. And there's no sidewalk there. So, this was dismissed. After review of video, insufficient evidence that the defendant impeded traffic. They didn't review any evidence. They just don't want to be embarrassed and tossed out. The courts don't have the police's back. It kind of makes the police impotent. That's not a good collaborative system. So I think working together, so I want to always focus on the positive because, positive and negatives cost us the same thing. So I choose to be positive. So I think by working together, whether it's Vision Zero or not, we can make sure each other's arrive home alive by serving and protecting everyone's right to travel safely and accessibly in our public spaces called roads. So a couple ideas for you. I want to make sure that you understand, I think there's things we can do that we haven't traditionally talked about. NCDMV Form 349, crash reports, only involve, I've learned, if it involves a moving motor vehicle on a public road. If the bike lane you're riding in is in the door zone and somebody opens a door of a parked car and you hit it, it doesn't count in the data forms. Because the Form 349 doesn't get filled out because the car wasn't moving. So the NCDOT say, well, we have no crash data for that bike lane. We think it's a good place. There's no crash data because they never collect the data. This summer, I had the honor to be on some discussions with the Mark Gazelle puts on this amazing every year a biannual conference, and it'll be in Greenville next time for Governor's Highway Safety. Amazing. So I was there and I was learning about, when you look at the emergency room data, only about 1/3 of bicycle crashes go reported compared to broken arms and wrists from bicycle crashes from the emergency room. So we're missing 2/3 or so of injuries. Fatalities are probably covered a little bit better. But if your bike, say, goes over railroad tracks and caught and you flip face plant, doesn't count. That railroad crossing could be horrible. That pothole, that crack, whatever, could be horrible. A moving motor vehicle wasn't involved. Form 349 doesn't get filled out.
Aren't bicycles considered?
By law, yes, they are considered vehicles, but we're not considered motor vehicles. DMV Form 349 has to involve a moving motor vehicle. We don't count. We don't count in the data. We don't count in the crash reports unless there's a moving motor vehicle involved. Therefore, they won't address the issues. It's a systemic problem. We may blame NCDOT for that road crossing, but their data doesn't support them. When we have legislators in this state that say, NCDOT, you can't use state funding or federal funding for standalone bike ped projects, their hands are tied. We criticize them and we beat up on them, and I do too. But sometimes it's not them. They can't do anything about it because the legislators have passed laws banning them to do anything about it. Things we can do to fix, I know Bike Law NC is working on that. Excuse me, BikeWalk NC, as well as BikeWalk NC. Contributory negligence. If you do 1% of anything wrong, you may get nothing. If I was over that white line, if I didn't have something, if I swerved, whatever, all those hundreds of thousands of dollars of bills and whatnot, well, right now they're being paid through my insurance, would be mine. I couldn't collect anything. ADA enforcement would help make our roads safer. But I want to real quick, because I know my time is almost up, because we watch this video once again. What I want to focus on, though, is the timestamp. Look at this. It's actually an hour off with daylight savings time. 47 right there. All right? Count with me, if you would. 48, 49. What the time difference? And listen carefully. So we're at 10 seconds. When I got hit, right at the change, okay? Hear me groaning, I'm moving off the ground. 10 seconds since impact. Sorry for, I tried not to cuss when I was dying or nearly dead, but 20 seconds. I think I've almost gotten off the road by now. Luckily, nobody's calling for closely or I would remember. 30 seconds.
We're calling 911, okay?
34 seconds, you hear footsteps. Motorists saw what occurred. Within 34 seconds, I had an emergency room doctor, an EMT, and a nurse who all stopped their cars, parked, got out, walked up to me, already called 911. 34 seconds. How the heck can that happen? Without each other, I may not have been here. 34 seconds, someone saw it, 3 people at least, saw it, stopped, found a place to park safely, walked up to me and were helping me out. If I had a heart attack in the emergency room, I don't think I'd get help that quickly. No offense, I mean, people are busy. But somehow, witnesses, within 34 seconds, were there helping me. That's where we help each other. That's how I think we can work together. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Stephen. Tasha?
Yet the driver couldn't see you.
But my understanding is, I've never heard, my understanding from the police officer is the driver stopped because she was mad that because my bicycle broke off her passenger mirror. Her phone records were never checked. I don't know. But I don't want to take away time. We talk later. Please.
Hello, my name is Tasha Harrison Springs, and I would like to show you a short video before I speak. It's a video that I created to show the impact of what people can do. This video particularly was for being at work on your phone. I'm trying to work with fleet drivers and creating cell phone policies to make people understand how serious it is. So I need your attention for just a few seconds on the video. Uh-oh. Oh, okay.
On my way. Adam 1035 Mary.
Okay, so I was involved in a tragic car crash on October 17, 2012. The crash that I caused, because it was my fault, I was texting and driving. My daughter, she had sent me a message about her cell phone bill. It was due that day and she wanted me to pay it. So she kept texting me back and forth, Mom, pay my bill, pay my bill. I was like, okay, I'm texting her back. I'm looking down, I'm looking up. And I text her back. I say, I'll pay your bill when I get ready. So I looked down, looked up for the last time. I connected to the overpass. When I hit the overpass, I was like grinding up against it. I saw the sparks and everything popping up in the air. And I was like, there's no way I could survive this crash. I didn't have my seatbelt on. I was doing 70 miles per hour, so I was speeding a little bit. My window was down. So as I'm driving and I connect to this overpass, when I release from the overpass, is a car traveling on the highway with me. So I hit this car. When I hit the car, my SUV begins to flip. Here is, wait a minute, how do I go? Okay, that's the SUV that I was in. I didn't get any pictures of the actual crash vehicle, but just to give you an idea of what I was driving at the time when it was rolling over, I'm surprised that I'm here to even speak because I was partially ejected out of the car as it was rolling. So I lost part of my ear, part of my face, and I have a lot of damage to the top part of my body. And I have photos for that. This was the next day, me waking up in the hospital. I feel guilty already. I don't know if you can tell in my face, but I already knew that I had crashed. I didn't know yet that I had hit people yet. They didn't tell me until the next day. So I'm in the hospital and I'm thinking, I hope I didn't kill anybody. I hope that I didn't hurt anyone. And I did. Okay. This is my arm. I had Z-plasty surgery where they had to take skin from my leg and distribute it throughout over my body, my arm, my face, my chest. This is my arm. My hand is crushed, as you can see in the video. It's like a little dented part is crushed right there. I can't really use my hand anymore. I'm disabled now. This is also my chest. I didn't want to get too graphic with it, but that's the right part of my chest. This is the left part of my chest. So I have severe scars and nerve damage on both sides of my chest. And I think that is the end of my slides. So when I woke up in the hospital, and I knew what I had done. I knew I was on my phone. I knew that texting and driving was banned, but I did it anyway, because I also know that I have, and I still do, but I've worked on myself teaching myself not to use my phone. So now I have this addiction to my phone. I have to turn it off. I have to put it on Do Not Disturb. I put it in my pocketbook. I throw it in the back seat. I used to put it in the glove compartment, but I stopped doing that because I was still trying to get it out the glove compartment. I had to put it where I couldn't get it, which is throwing it in the back seat. So I spent the 5 weeks in the hospital. While I was sitting in the hospital, I was like, I have to tell people what I was doing because a lot of people, they won't admit to what they're doing in their cars. They might say deer ran out in front of the car or anything. They'll make up anything. Nobody wants to be held accountable and take responsibility for what we're doing in our cars. But for me, I had to. The guilt, I even feeling remorse because I could have killed the people that I hit. I had to, I know I suffered. I had post-traumatic stress. I was in pain. They told me that the people that I hit were treated and released that night. But I also, just like my daughter's phone bill, I was like, I'll pay my insurance when I get ready. So my insurance had lapsed. So when I hit them, I didn't have insurance on my car. So going through that and knowing how I was suffering financially, I knew that they were suffering more. So I had to figure out a way where I could share my story, and in sharing my story, First of all, I had to forgive myself. Second of all, I have to find the people that I hit because I haven't met them yet and I want to. One of the reasons why I'm here financially, I want to be able to give back to them. I want to be able to start a foundation and find the lady that I hit because I know who she is. I just have to get brave enough to meet her. And that is the accountability that I'm having to deal with because I still feel, it feels terrible because I know I hit people. I know I hurt them. And now I'm working with an organization called Street Safe US out of Wilmington, North Carolina. And I go and I share my story as an impact speaker. I share my story in hopes that people will realize that we have to hold ourselves accountable. And it's like, if you can't be anything, be kind. When you're on the road and you see other people on their phones, think about that person hitting you. And then if you're on your phone, and yeah, I was the type person, I was like, you can't tell me what to do in my car. This is my car. I'm going to do what I want to do. But no, there are laws and regulations in place that are put in place to protect us, to help us protect each other. You have to take accountability for what you're doing. I'm not going to say that everybody in here uses their phones while they're driving, but a lot of us do. Because I know for a fact, even though after that crash, I will still grab my phone if I see it, if I hear it. So I have to put it away. I created a program called the MAD Method, Mindfully Aware Drivers. It's a 21-day prevention program that I created based off of my own bad cell phone habits. So as I do, every day I wake up, every morning I wake up and I pray. Later on that day, I meditate. I set my intentions. I do affirmations to keep myself aware of what I'm doing in my car. So while I created this program based off, like I said, going to Street Safe, I had created like a quiz, an assessment that I would give people, and they would fill out the information. They'll give it back to me, and I'll know, okay, from 1 to 12, you have an addiction. You have a mild addiction. You may need to take my program. It's 21 days of setting your intentions on being a safer driver. So while I'm standing here and I'm talking to y'all, I just want you to know that you're not alone in this. We're all in this together. And if we work together, we can reach Vision Zero if we take responsibility for what we're doing. I have the pain every day. I have to wake up every day and look at myself. And I have to look in the mirror and see myself and know what I did. I don't want any of y'all to trade places with me. I don't know if any of y'all have ever been driving and swerved. I did. That was the first sign. I was in a car with my daughter the year before this crash. I was in the car with my daughter. I'm looking up coupons. We're going to go shopping. So I'm looking up coupons. At the time, I was texting my boyfriend, the boyfriend that I had. I was talking to her. I was drinking an energy drink. I'm doing all these things. And then I look up and I swerve. I almost hit a mailbox. My daughter, she's like, oh, mom, don't do that. We have this class. And they were like, texting and driving, it can kill you. It can kill you. I told her to shut up. I know what I'm doing. Stay in the driver's seat. This is what I told my child. I'm teaching her how to drive. She's copying me. I set the example for her. I have a son now. He's been in 2 really bad crashes. One, he was in a truck and he fell off an embankment. He was on his phone FaceTiming somebody. He had another crash. This wasn't a distracted driving crash, but he ran a red light and he got drugged on a moped a couple of feet up the street. So this is affecting my family. And I set the example. I'm mommy. If mommy does it, why can't I do it? So I'm pleading to everyone here, anyone that's listening online, just think about what you're doing when you get in your car. Eating, drinking, talking on the phone. We have these devices in our cars now, the infotainment center. I have learned from that too. I turn it off. You can't get a new car now without it being in the car. And I'm not sure if it will cost more money to get it turned off or taken out of the car. But I tried to change the radio station and I swerved. I turned the radio off. I don't want to hear nothing. I don't drive with the radio on. I don't listen to anything but the road in the car. I have even heard things in my car that needs to be fixed because it's silent. And I'm like, what is that noise? So it's things that we can do. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to really pay attention to what we're doing in our cars. We have to also pay attention if you have children, grandchildren, they're watching us. They're learning from us. These are the new generation of drivers. Would you want to ride with them if they were doing the same thing you're doing in the car? Okay, how many more minutes? I'm good. So I'm also I'm doing my best to get Vision Zero in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where I'm from. I'm also working whenever they put it back in rotation to try to get hands-free NC, the hands-free law going in North Carolina. I'm behind any initiative. I will partner with anyone that has the Vision Zero vision. Anyone that wants to stop this from happening. I know it can be eradicated. I know it can be stopped because I have stopped it myself. I am the change I want to see. I change my behavior. And that's a big key part of it. The change behavior, the laws, people accepting responsibility for what you're doing in your car. We all have to work together. And that's why I'm standing here. And this is why I am admitting my guilt. Because if I can do it, anybody can do it. Is how you feel about other people. I love people. I don't like them all the time, but I love people. I love the idea of people. I love being able to talk and connect and learn from each other. And this is what we're doing. I'm hoping now as I'm talking, you're learning from me because this is hard. I know everybody's judging me. It doesn't feel good, but I'm here. And I just want everybody to understand, before I start crying, I just want everybody to understand if we work together and we do love our neighbors, love your neighbor and put your phone down. Stop doing stuff in the car. Get where you want to go. Like, if you really need to use your phone, pull over in a safe location. Don't just pull over on the side of the highway to make a phone call or text. We have rest stops. You have Walmart parking lots. You have gas stations. You have, if it's somebody in your car and you trust them with your phone, give them your phone. You have a designated texter. Let them text for you. You got a Bluetooth, use your Bluetooth. I don't recommend that. Like, I really don't believe we need to have our phones in our cars at all. But that's me. That's my wish. I'm praying for it because we don't need these phones in our cars. And I'm done. Thank you for listening.
So before Ann speaks, I just want to highlight something here that I neglected to say earlier. I owe Ann a debt of gratitude as well. At the third bike summit in Greensboro many years ago, she was presenting. And she made an advice about if you're out there cycling often on the roads, talk to your insurance carrier, get under or uninsured motorist coverage. I went back to my wife and family and we talked about it before I went across the country on a bike and we did that. What a radical change it made in this particular situation. I hope you never need to use it. If you don't have it, it's inexpensive. Talk to whoever your agent is. Cover yourself and be protected. It's an amazing thing. So if you get no other advice, listen to Ann. She can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in 15 minutes or less.
Guys, we were late getting started, so we're going to run over just a little bit. We do have a break afterwards, but hang with us, please. These are powerful stories.
My bio is a little bit out of date, actually 10 at least years out of date. So I've actually been practicing law for, I can't do the math, since 1995, and I've been representing bicyclists for about 20 years. And during those 20 years, I've seen so many of these stories, and I mean, they never get easier. They're all like this, not all of them. I mean, some people have some property damage, and I've given advice to hundreds of people, free advice. I do it all the time. But I still see families affected. I've represented, families of people who have been killed by inattentive motorists, and that's really the big, huge thing these days. I mean, kind of going all over the place. But when I took a league bicycling course, I don't know, probably 15, 20 years ago. And I don't know what the statistics are off the top of my head now, but at the time, the biggest collisions were intersection collisions, just because, communication and things like that. But what I see most often coming to me now is, what I see very often is hit from behind collisions, and collisions that are obviously caused by inattentive driving. So it's something that we definitely have to stop. And yeah, so that's really important. What I do, just to give you a little bit of background, Bike Law is a national network of lawyers who focus on representing bicyclists. So that's our passion. Anybody who's in the network is passionate about bicycling, is a bicyclist. I do mountain bike, but I spend a lot of time on the road. The nice thing about mountain biking is that if I crash, it's just totally my fault. Yeah, so I represent individual bicyclists and work to get justice for bicyclists who are injured or their families. And the other thing I do is try to teach bicyclists and bicycling groups and groups like this about what you can do to make sure you're as safe as possible, and different ways that you can protect yourself, both in terms of physical safety and also what to do if you're involved in a crash, or how to, even before you go out on the road, protect yourself in the event that you'd ever be involved in a crash. So just to start with, this is the ride guide. If you haven't seen this, oh gosh, I don't remember when I first wrote the first edition, maybe 8 years ago or 10 years ago. I don't know if any of you, I'm sure a lot of you remember that Department of Transportation pedestrian book that's now been taken off the website, but all it did was take the motor vehicle laws and put the word bicycle in it. And so it really wasn't very helpful and didn't make sense. And so I thought, well, we need some place to look to find laws that make sense for bicyclists, because we don't have a lot of bicycle specific laws in North Carolina. We're really left to interpret the motor vehicle laws, and sometimes that's very confusing. So I've put this together. You can find it online at, if you just Google Bike Law North Carolina Ride Guide, it'll pop right up. And if you have a group that you want to get hard copies for your group, there's ways to do that too. People like the hard copies, they're little, really cute. I want to talk about contributory negligence, which Stephen mentioned. And the reason this is so important, North Carolina is 1 out of 4 states that have this really horrible, egregious law. And BikeWalk NC and some other organizations have tried repeatedly to help pass bills to get rid of this law. And hopefully it's going to come sometime in the next few years. But right now, it doesn't just apply to bicyclists, it applies to anybody who's hurt by somebody else's fault. And the person who who ran the red light or who hit the person from behind, if they can come up with some reason why the hurt person could have avoided the crash, then even if they're only 1% at fault, then the hurt person collects nothing. Now, in other states, the hurt person would collect 99%. So if you got hit in South Carolina, and they said, oh, well, maybe if you had looked up a second sooner, you could have avoided the crash, you'd still get 99% of your damages. So it's really not even an issue in that kind of case in South Carolina. But because they can prevent paying anything, if they can prove 1%, it's always an issue here. And I just kind of want to show you some examples, because I feel like seeing this can kind of help you understand how to avoid being in the situation, God forbid, if you're ever in a crash. Oh, yeah, there's the diatribe. So yeah, this is a case where, the bicyclist is riding, this is a hill. She's heading toward the crest of a hill, and the driver is coming up from behind. He decides he wants to pass, but then he gets nervous because he can't see over the top of the hill, and maybe there's a car coming. And so he goes in right behind her and hits her and sends her flying. And they claim contributory negligence in that case. And really the only reason we could figure out is because she was riding a bike. Now, we litigated the whole case. We filed a lawsuit. We did all this discovery, and we went to trial. We tried the whole case to a verdict. And by the time we got to trial, they dropped the contributory negligence instruction. But it adds a huge hurdle throughout the lawsuit if they can bring up that defense. This is one that happened in Durham. Bicyclist riding on a huge shoulder. It's 55-mile-an-hour road. I've ridden on this road in Durham multiple times, and you don't really ride on it for very long, but it's kind of a connector road, and everybody always rides on the shoulder because it's just huge. And it's 1 lane and 55 miles an hour. Well, the driver veers off the road into the shoulder and hits the bicyclist and sends him into the guardrail. And he had the nerve to claim that the bicyclist had some negligence. He said the bicyclist swerved in front of him, which is ridiculous. We also tried that case to verdict and won that. And they continued throughout the trial to claim that the bicyclist was contributory negligent, and he was unfortunately passed away, and so we had to use science to prove that the driver was lying. And also, the police in this case did a great investigation, and they took the driver's phone and they downloaded it. And it turned out that he was not only texting and driving, he was emailing, he was on a call. Sometimes he was sending an email while he was on a call. And his big argument was, well, you can't show that that's what caused the crash. I'm like, well, you were doing it for half an hour, so really you drove off the road and hit somebody during that 1 second that you weren't doing something on your phone. Okay. So back to contributory negligence, this is one, and I couldn't believe they put it in this case, because you can see the driver cut the corner. I mean, and the police drew it accurately. Driver comes and makes a left turn, and the bicyclist was at the stop sign, and he had looked left and he was about to turn right. So, you can turn right when somebody else is turning left. They're not going to interfere if they're doing it right. But they said he was in front of the stop line. And so a jury could believe that he was contributory negligent. We ended up settling that case, but it was on the eve of trial. And this is, I want to, you saw Steven's video, but this is kind of a comparison of some cases where you have video and where you don't have video. So you all probably know what a right hook is, but here's a diagram in case you don't know the language. But it's basically somebody's in the bike lane and the driver turns right, and usually without a signal, and there's no room for the bicyclist to stop because they're at speed, and they run into the car. Now, we get a lot of calls with this kind of case. It's an issue with bike lanes, and that's something to be aware of. But sometimes it's hard, and there were a couple cases where we got calls around all the same time. And, in two of them, the person they were injured, but, very short-term injury, minimal medical treatment, and it was their word against the drivers. And so our option there's no witness, we have to use science to prove it. Well, science is expensive. And, so the question is, can you spend the money to, come out negative at the end of a trial? So, they ended up deciding to just not pursue it. But the third case, this person did have a video, which I will show you if I can find the play button. Oh no. So yeah, okay, so right at the last second, she turns on her signal, but it's too late. I mean, you can see, this is a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I don't always ride with video, but I try to, and I encourage people because it makes such a huge difference. I didn't have to hire an expert in this case. Thankfully, this person healed up really well. He didn't have very long-term damages, but we were able to get his case resolved because of that video. And the driver lied to her insurance company, and she said that he ran into her in the parking lot. So that was helpful. But we were able to prove that she was lying. Oh, gosh, sorry. How do I get to the next? Go away. Sorry. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so, okay. These are some things, I'm not going to really go through all these because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time. You can have the slide, but I put it up here because people want to list. So, this is a slide that you can have somehow. We'll get it to you if you want it. But they're kind of basic things, a lot of times there's adrenaline going. So if you kind of commit them to memory, then, your knowledge can overcome your irrational thinking at the time of the crash, which people have, and it's understandable. But you got to insist on a crash report. It's really hard to get one later. You got to call 911. If the ambulance comes and they say you need medical treatment, but you feel okay, listen to the ambulance, listen to the EMT, do what they tell you. If you can, it's not as possible, but if you can gather information, or you're with a friend who gets hit and you can gather information for them. A lot of times the police officers don't, either because they don't care. We've had them ignore. We've seen, and this is more rare, but I have a case right now, which I'm about to try in 2 weeks, where the police officer, the witness says, I was trying to get the police officer to take down my statement because I saw the driver run the red light. And the police officer wouldn't talk to her, but talked to the 2 other witnesses that supported the driver. So, we were lucky to have that witness name. I think she found our client and told her. But more information you can get about that, the better. Any photos of debris on the road, where the vehicles are at rest, that makes such a huge difference. Sometimes they're moved, and it affects how good the science, how much you can use the science to prove your case if you don't know where the vehicles ended up, where the resting place was. Point out, this is Stephen reminded me of this when he said that they didn't put his lights in the police report, but if you can and you're not in a physical condition where you can't talk, point out to the officer, I have lights on my bike, because they sometimes just don't see things, or they're not focused. They're taking the statement from the driver. You have the attention of the EMTs, and so make sure that if you can, make sure that they have that information. Get medical care. All right, things to not do. Oh, shoot, I did want to go back and talking about contributory negligence. So there are some things that are not legally required, but I do recommend at least that you think about, okay? So you're not legally required to wear bright clothing. And there's debates about how much of a difference this color makes versus that color makes, whatever. You're not legally required to use a light during the day. You're not legally required to make eye contact with drivers before coming out onto a road or whatever. But all of those things, it takes away an excuse, okay? Because that's the first thing a driver will say. I didn't see them, they're wearing black clothing. Oh, the road was shadowy, so I couldn't see them. And so, it just takes away their opportunity to make that argument, or makes them look stupid if they make it. So the more you can take away those excuses, the better off you are, at least in this contributory negligence state. Yeah, so another thing along those lines is that, and I'm kind of skipping all over the place because I'm thinking about what Stephen and Tasha talked about. I love that Tasha is being held accountable, or that she's holding herself accountable. It's amazing how often that does not happen. Okay, so I mean, we have cases that are just obvious fault by the driver, even when the insurance company admits fault on behalf of the driver, where the driver will say they have no fault. I mean, it's unbelievable. So, I think a lot of times people come out of a crash thinking the driver's going to do the right thing. Sometimes it is bad intent, but I also think that sometimes people don't want to admit to themselves that they've done something wrong, whether it's be on their phone or just, not pay attention for whatever reason. So, that's another big reason for making sure that you have as much information as possible. These are all kind of obvious things. It's another slide that you can have. One thing that comes up sometimes, all right, so there's kind of a fine line. You don't want to ever be in a situation where the police officer says what happened and you say, I don't want to tell you because I need to talk to my lawyer first. That looks really bad. You want to tell them basically what happened. I was driving down the road and the driver pulled out in front of me, or the driver hit me from behind. But what I don't want to see is people who, and the police officers almost never ask questions like this, but sometimes insurance adjusters always will. How many feet were you away from the intersection when you first saw the car? Where were you looking? Just like very detailed, especially with times and distances. How many seconds between this time and this time? Those are things that can really get you in trouble, and not because we're trying to fudge it or make it work in our favor or whatever, but because you don't know. All right, you don't know the distance. And I had a client who was a roofer, and he's, I can estimate distances. I'm really good at it. I do it for a living. I'm like, you cannot estimate the distance that you experienced during the crash. He tried to do it during his deposition anyway, and he was wrong. So just tell the basic story, but don't go into that level of detail. And you really don't want to talk to an insurance adjuster, even if you're minimally hurt. I'm here for free advice, right? Or my office or I are there for free advice. You don't have to talk to an insurance adjuster before you talk to one of us, or an experienced bicycle lawyer who's handled hundreds of cases and knows what to expect from these questions when things come up. We're gonna skip a whole bunch of stuff. So there are major holes in the law, and before I even talk about that, there's a difference between the criminal justice system and the civil justice system. So I mentioned in the beginning that I represent individuals, and my job is through the civil system to get justice for the individual bicyclists I represent. And in the civil system, that justice is money. Okay, that's what we have. I can't make them better, obviously. I can't change the laws, but those are the tools that I have. The criminal justice system is where the state of North Carolina, through their district attorneys in the various counties, seeks justice on behalf of the state. Okay, so when Stephen goes into court in the criminal matter, he is not a party. Right? It's the state of North Carolina against the driver. That's the same in a murder case or a traffic ticket. And so he, as a victim, has laws that protect him, you know, and allow him to have a say-so in the court and be heard and have, you know, his thoughts heard about what should happen. But he's not a party, so he doesn't get to make the decisions, and he doesn't get to pick what charges the police bring or the DA pursues. So it's tough. It's really tough for people to go in and you know, find out that, okay, yes, I'm injured now for the next year or two, or some people are injured for long term, and this person was charged with failure to yield, and that's it. It's an infraction. Okay. And the DA is going to dismiss it because the guy came in with a letter from his insurance company saying they're paying for property damage. It happens, and some of DA's offices have that policy where they'll do that, and it's very frustrating. And this is a law. There are laws that we need to change in the criminal justice system. We need better vulnerable user laws. We need something in between manslaughter. So if somebody is drunk driving and kills somebody, whether it's on a bike or another car, whatever, they can be charged with manslaughter, okay? In that case where the guy was texting and driving and calling and he drove off the shoulder and hit the guy, we tried to get the DA to pursue manslaughter charges against him. Like, you got the proof here. He didn't think he had the proof because he has to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm like, if there's ever a case where you have the texting and driving information, it's here. So that law needs to be changed. And there's no precedent for it in North Carolina. We can pursue punitive damages on the civil side, but on the criminal side, it hasn't been done, and no one's gone out on a limb yet to do it. You know, and there's cases where somebody is, you know, it's something in between that egregious behavior and just, you know, something happens, and we need something in between infractions and murder to hold people accountable in the criminal justice system. So if you are interested in some of that, I did a long, very long talk. It's on the Bike Law North Carolina Facebook page, also on YouTube, with a assistant district attorney from Mecklenburg County, and we asked him all these questions about, you know, how the system works and why it, you know, why things work the way they do, and he gave a lot of answers. So if you're interested in that, looking at that further, you can find that there. The insurance process, like Stephen talked about, it's really, really important to have your own coverage, because there's a lot of people out there on the road driving around with minimum limits, which is $30,000. Like, how long do you think $30,000 is going to last if you have to go to the hospital for 2 days? Not at all, right? So you look at your own policy. I think I might have. Okay, well, it's listed there. Call me if you have any questions, or email me. You look at your own policy, and the front page is called Declarations. It says your limits, your liability limits, your property damage limits, something called med pay, which that's nice to have too. And then you'll see underinsured, uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage. And it really is inexpensive to add that. I have $1 million on my policy. Okay, and I think it costs me $20 a month on top of the other coverage. So I know I'm protected. And some people think that they have an umbrella and that they're, you know, if I have $1 million umbrella, do I have uninsured coverage? And the answer is maybe. Umbrellas are very minimally regulated compared to auto and homeowners policies in the state. And so most people's umbrellas don't have underinsured coverage, so don't rely on that. Some of them do, but read it carefully or have somebody read it with you. Property damage, I'm not going to go through all of that, but you know, that's separate from the bodily injury. You can, you know, bikes are expensive and sometimes they're complicated because you added wheels later and all these other things. You know, that's a whole different thing. MedPay I mentioned. So yeah, so there's all these different, it can get complicated because there's all these different coverages and pieces of a claim that you have to look at. And we're not even to a lawsuit yet. And don't worry, I'm going to cut myself off really soon. But yeah, another really big thing is liens. Medical providers can have liens if they your health insurance pays some and then there's an outstanding balance or whatever, they can assert a lien on any third-party recovery, which would be a settlement or a verdict. If you have a health plan, so auto insurance companies will not pay your bills if you're injured, even if they admit that their insured is liable or at fault, they won't pay your bills along the way. Okay, that isn't how it works. They'll pay a lump sum at the very end. And so, if you don't have health insurance, it's really hard, but there's ways around it. But if you do have health insurance, you should use it. And your health plan will then come back and want their money back. And that is a whole other can of worms, and we deal with that all the time. All right, so there's this whole process. It's a lot of gathering of information. It's interviewing of witnesses. It's communicating with insurance companies. And when we get a client, we gather their medical records and we're reading them, and we are all along the way trying to show the insurance company what our client is going through and how this has affected their lives, and set the stage for down the road the negotiation. And so that's a whole process. There's a whole process for the negotiations. It can be very easy if you have minimal injuries and there's no weirdness about who's at fault. You can do it yourself, but if it starts to get more serious, then it becomes complicated very quickly in terms of some of these tricky things. And the insurance companies care more. If it's small, they're like, okay, take some money. But if it's big, they're trying to protect their pocket. So last resort, if we can't agree on the value of your damages, what you're owed, it's your medical bills, and it's everything, every way in which has affected your life, which, a lot of times people call me at the beginning and they say, oh, I don't really care. I just want to get my medical bills paid and my time out of work. Well, 6 months down the road, when you still can't get on your bike and you still can't, do the things you were doing before, typically they will care more, and you're entitled to damages for those things, but there's no automatic value to that. So it's a back and forth. It's an argument, negotiation. It's our job to prove the value of those damages. And if we can't agree on either that or who's at fault, then we have to file a lawsuit. And I am not going to go over all this, but this is just like a very, very gelled down process of a lawsuit. All right, just like to make it super simple and on one page. And even that is crazy looking, I know. So kind of give you an idea of what you would expect. And we'd file that in court. The only other, most of the cases we deal with involve motor vehicle, bicycle crashes. Sometimes we handle dog cases. Those are tricky for other reasons. We have handled some cases against Department of Transportation. There's some people here, but somebody mentioned there was a question about Department of Transportation. Oh yeah, no, you talked about it, Stephen, about bike lanes and how that's not, they don't have the crash data. Okay, so here's what I want to say about that. If you see something on the road, whether it's a giant, terrible pothole that that's really dangerous, or inappropriately placed bike lane, call your local Department of Transportation office and report it, and have all your friends report it too, because now they know. They know if there's a crash, they know if there's a problem, but they also know if it's reported. And we handled a case against DOT, and their biggest argument was they never got notice of this defect in the road. And actually they had, but that was a whole other thing. But it's very important to make the record, let them know, and then they can go out and look and decide whether their engineers can decide whether it's appropriate to fix it. And hopefully they will consult somebody who knows something about bicycling and whether it's a danger to bicyclists. But y'all can fight about that another day. And I think that's it. I hope I didn't take up too much time. Thank you. All right, I have one more video. Sorry. Okay, this was in a lawsuit, and I just want to show this to show how, and it's, the names there, this is public record because the lawsuit was filed. Came within a few weeks of trial. This is a case where liability was very much contested. And the driver said that this driver was a security guard and he was coming off he was finishing up a 12-hour shift, and turns out he didn't have a driver's license. And he's speeding 53 and a 40. And he says that I'm driving down the road in the left lane and I see the bicyclist up ahead in the right lane. And as I get within 10 feet, the bicyclist swerves in front of me. Okay, well, I look at it and I say, 10 feet, that's a very short distance if you're going 53 miles an hour and the bicyclist is going, 12, 15 or whatever. It's a young guy on his way to work early in the morning. And the rear tire is smashed in. So how did that happen if the bicyclist swerved in front of you? Now, this were some pretty significant injuries in this case. So we, wanted to really make sure that our proof was, airtight. So we had an engineer who was an expert, and then we also hired this company to develop this video. Because we have to show the jury, we have to explain to the jury why this doesn't work the way the driver said. So this is using the driver's own words to show that it's impossible for it to have happened the way he said that it happened. And the pictures of the car show the left side, passenger side, is smashed up. So it didn't happen the way the driver said. And kind of gives you an idea of some of the things that we have to go through to prove our stories. And that was a big one. Just wanted y'all to see that. That is it. Thank you.
Wrap us up, please. Thank you very much.
Hello. Sorry, we're a bit over, so I'm going to go a little bit faster. And if anybody has any questions at the end, I'll be happy to discuss and answer them. I'll hang out for a little bit. Favorite pizza, Illuminati's. You can get it freeze-dried, delivered to you if you'd like, and it's delicious. So I've been a trauma surgeon here in Greenville for just over 10 years now. And we do see a lot of bicyclists injured. And maybe I remember it a little bit more because I also cycle. When work schedule is good, I'm a triathlete. When it's not, I'm a couch potato. But we see about 3,000 patients a year that are trauma patients that come to our center. We cover an area that's essentially from the Virginia border down to Wilmington and everything from the coast to 95. So it's a big catchment area. I pulled some data for the last 5 years, and about 50 patients a year we see are cyclists that are injured. Not all of those were struck by motor vehicles. Sometimes that's just a regular biking accident. You hit some railroad tracks or a rock in the road, or a dog caused you to fall. But about 50 patients a year. When we look at the yearly data, 2019 we started to go up. So typical year was about 30 patients, and in 2019 we jumped to 60 patients a year, and we dipped back down, but about 55 patients a year for in 2020 and 2021. So that does make up a small percentage of the patients that we're seeing, but they do have significant injuries. And so when you look at the average hospital stay that someone that was a cyclist injured, that's 6.6 days at our institution. Now, some people are going to be injured and released, and that doesn't mean that they're healed and fine to go. They might have some other injuries that require some care. And some patients may stay for significantly longer time. If you look for where people go after they're injured, about 75% of them are able to go home. Others might go to a long-term care facility, a nursing home, or rehab. Obviously, significant smaller percentages, but about 3% of the patients in our institution that we see that were cyclists injured do die. And that fits with what the CDC data would say. In the CDC, about 130,000 patients, cyclists injured a year, with a small percentage of them dying. But we do see a number of significant injuries. I kind of went through our registry just to kind of figure out what that looks like. And as you can imagine, skin and soft tissue injuries are pretty significant. And that tends to sound minor, but these wounds might take a long time to heal or may never heal. Lots of them are treated just like a major burn, like if you have a road rash. But some of these deep cuts and lacerations might also injure muscles, tendons, and other things and cause permanent damage. In our patients, we see a lot of chest trauma. Typically, that's going to be bruised lungs, rib fractures, might cause significant long-term morbidity, just as with chronic pain and other things. Extremity fractures, extremely common. Spinal fractures, spinal cord injuries, significant TBI. So in our area, looking at patients that come in, about 50% of them seem to be unhelmeted. About 25% wear helmets, and in the other 25%, we just don't have the data to say whether they were helmeted or not. So we do have about 50% of our patients will have some component of a traumatic brain injury. That can range from anything from a concussion, which, as you guys all know, concussions may be short-lived or can cause you long-term problems, or significant bleeding on the brain, might even require surgery. So in this area, it is a significant problem, and it does significantly change your life. 6 days in the hospital might seem minor, but when it's 90 days, a year, 2 years in recovery, obviously very significant. If anybody have any questions? So I didn't break out the data in that, but it's about 50% have a traumatic brain injury. And if you look at our patients, we only have helmet data for that they were wearing helmet in 25%. So obviously, if you look at the national studies, the published literature out there, helmets do decrease severe traumatic brain injury and death related to brain injury. But the patients still do get brain injuries, even if they're wearing helmets. Yes, sir.
That is data available publicly from all trauma centers at least an aggregate level?
Yeah, so there is state level data. I tried to get it just to see what the NC state data is. They're going to charge me $160 per hour that they worked on just pulling it. So not necessarily available, but you can look at CDC. We'll have some generalized data for people to look at. Otherwise, you have to do like a database query, and it generally requires access and some money. Thank you.
Okay, as I promised, awesome session. Let's give them a hand one more time.
Just a quick announcement. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to come back here for the final session. We're going to reset and allow you to kind of recover from this last one, but we appreciate your patience. We'll see you back here in 10 minutes.
So glad I haven't seen your face because I went to Raleigh
Pardon me, but if you, I'm gonna actually write my other email down.
Yeah, I have mine too.
This might be
Oh, yeah.
better. All right, this is-
Thank you.